It's a complex situation, but I'll do my best to explain. I have a bio son, Leo, 16, from my previous relationship. I married his stepmom, who is a mother of 2 boys, Connor, 20, deceased, and Derek, 12. I've never had the pleasure to meet Connor, who tragically passed away from a motorcycle accident. Derek was so devastated by this loss, and although it's been years, he's still pretty much grieving. I've seen tons of pictures and videos of Connor and made efforts to get to know who he was as a way to share Derek's grief and be there for him, to lend an ear and a comforting shoulder. It's safe to say that Derek and I grew a strong bond in no time. But my son Leo isn't close to Derek. Understandable, because not all siblings and step-siblings are the same. Leo and Derek are different in everything, which isn't a bad thing, but Leo calls himself the brutally honest type and makes insensitive comments about Derek most of the time. They tend to be under the guise of advice. Derek never complained, so I had to step in and tell Leo to stop being insensitive towards his stepbrother, especially with everything regarding Connor and his memory. Leo would say, "Okay, I get it, and I won't do it again." Days ago, Leo wanted to hang out with friends and asked Derek if he wanted to join. Derek agreed and put on Connor's hoodie before going out. Leo commented on the hoodie and called it ugly and asked him to put on something else, but Derek insisted on wearing it or not go. Leo dropped it. Hours later, Derek came home crying with his hoodie in hand. He said Leo and friends cut it into pieces while he was in the bathroom after they convinced him to take it off. I was furious. I asked Leo, and he said it was his friend's idea, then said he had to do it since Derek wears it everywhere, and it looked old and embarrassing. I reminded him who this hoodie belonged to, and he said, "So what? Maybe this will help him move on in life." I told him his birthday was cancelled and his friends aren't welcome anymore. He pitched a fit saying his birthday was a right, not a privilege, and I can't cancel it. He had my ex criticize my decision and wanted to host his birthday party, but I refused because he's grounded, so no party anywhere. She and her family called me awful and ridiculous and asked me to think how Leo will hate me for this, but I insisted he needed punishment for putting his stepbrother through this. I'm not gonna be shy about this. My sister sucks. She is a horrible, self-centered person who thinks she is the main character. She is not only a horrible person, she is a step monster. She married this guy, who is a freaking pushover, 3 years ago. He has 2 children, 10 and 6. My sister constantly complains about them, saying things like the 6-year-old is gross because he sips too loud or has stained clothing. For the love of God, he is 6. That's what a child is supposed to do. And she is so mean to the 10-year-old girl. She acts straight out jealous of her. I've caught her taunting her that daddy loves my sister more than her. She is horrible. I have straight up called her out after trying to talk to her like a million times. At Christmas she was saying that I'd be nice to have the kids there, and I said, "Why? You hate them?" This was when everything was almost over and she had been bragging to her friends that her husband had spent more on her than on daughter. A fight ensued. My parents reprimanded me, but my cousins took my side and called her out, noting every moment that they had witnessed her being horrible. Her husband obviously took her side and said that she was a wonderful stepmother and that the kids love her. To which I said that was a lie, as I had consoled them countless times after they were taunted by my sister. They left and we haven't talked since. One day I was running errands and run into my step-nephews who were with their mother. I had never met her. And honestly, she is wonderful. We decided to have some coffee. While the kids were playing, she asked me how her children behaved, etc. I said they were wonderful, and then I just spilled the beans on my sister. How awful she was. What I've heard her say to the kids, the inaction of her ex-husband. By the end she was horrified. She said the kids didn't like her. But she always chucked it up to my sister being the new woman in their father's life. She said the kids never really said anything even when she asked. I then told her I was very concerned for the children, as my sister had straight up told the 10-year-old that it would be better if she disappeared from her father's life. Their mother saw red and asked me if I'd be willing to testify. She said that this was unacceptable and she would be taking their father to court again. I said I would recount the events that I witnessed and could ask my cousins who witnessed a lot too. She was very grateful. I asked my cousins who were all willing to recount the events. Word got around to my parents and by extension my sister, and they have been calling me the biggest asshole on the planet who would betray family on a whim. I have a lot of family members. I come from a religious community that doesn't believe in the public school system and tends to have a ton of kids. I have an older sister, Julia, a stepbrother, Ron, a stepsister, Molly, a half-brother, Joe, and a half-sister, Lucy. Growing up, all of us were homeschooled. This involved a lot of neglect, lack of textbooks or seasonally appropriate clothes / shoes, unheated house, and sometimes physical abuse. I lived mostly with my mom, but spent weekends with my step-family. Both houses were dysfunctional. My stepmom used to have a severe problem with alcoholism, although she's been better in the last few years. Ron is my best friend and I would be lost without him. We've supported each other through years of hard times. And we discuss a lot how our lives could have been different if we'd been sent to school or generally had a more healthy home life. Obviously, we don't want the same thing for our younger siblings, and don't want to see them struggling in minimum wage jobs while trying to study for a GED the way we're doing. When I went to visit him recently, I found that my stepmom had gone out of the country for an entire week and left the youngest two at the house. Ron and Molly both work. Molly hasn't been doing any homeschooling for about 2 years, and are out of the house for most of the day and night. I tried to help Lucy with her math homework, but she was extremely behind grade level and kept getting distracted because she had to make lunch or do chores. Joe spends all day in his room playing video games and gets no guidance from anyone. I tried to as gently as possible get him to do some reading, but he doesn't understand how serious the situation is, and obviously is having too much fun to care. So I called CPS and reported educational neglect. And obviously everyone knew it was me. And Ron told me that stepmom said I wasn't welcome at the house anymore and to never contact any of them again. Molly is extremely mad at me. She blocked me on Facebook and doesn't have a cell phone where I can reach her. Julia, who somehow heard about all this despite living across the country, also blocked me on Facebook and reported my Facebook as impersonating a celebrity. Facebook deleted it, generally making everything harder. This stings even more because I'm already estranged from my biomom over my religious beliefs. I now have no family members left, besides Ron, thank bejeebus, who want anything to do with me. I feel like I make enemies everywhere I go. Ron has been saying for years that he can't call CPS, and I guess this is why, but at least he doesn't blame me. He suggested that I try to talk to stepmom once some time has passed, but I would have no idea where to begin. My boyfriend's mom makes these amazing cookie bars. She makes them for the holidays and family gatherings, and people always request that she brings them. I asked for the recipe once and she laughed and said no, that it was hers and she doesn't give it out to anyone. I dropped it and never asked again. I started baking a lot during the pandemic. It's been fun for me in my downtime. I decided with my free time to try to recreate the cookie bars my boyfriend's mom makes. I pulled up recipes that sounded similar from online blogs and started baking and tweaking. It took about 5 recipes and batches, but I finally nailed it down. Her secret recipe ended up essentially being a cookie bar known as a Carmelita. I then decided to make it my own and improve it to my tastes. I used higher quality chocolate, made sauce with local homemade caramels, used flaky sea salt on top, vanilla bean paste instead of extract, added a pinch of this fantastic organic cinnamon I had on hand. The results were over the top delicious. My boyfriend declared they are better than his mom's, and he finished off half a pan in 2 days. He was FaceTiming with his mom Saturday and eating one. She asked what it was and he said, "One of your caramel bars." Joe found a recipe online but made it even better. She lost it. She started yelling about how awful I was for making her cookies and how I had no right. He told her that she was overreacting and quickly ended the call. She started blowing up my phone with nasty texts about what an asshole I am. I explained to her that I found the recipe I used online where it was very public. I had actually tweaked that to make it more my own, and that I wasn't ever planning on bringing them to an event she's at, so I did not see what the big deal was. She didn't care. She called me names and told me I was wrong for baking a recipe that I knew was similar to hers. She isn't speaking to me or her son. While I don't think my boyfriend should have made the comment about how I made it even better to his mom. Taking that out of the equation, she thinks I'm an asshole for even making them to begin with. I disagree, but from the texts from her and a couple other family members of hers, they think I crossed a line.